going on, everybody? Hope you're having a wonderful day today. John Matrix here. So, power armor is like the staple image that you see of Warhammer 40k. You see an ultramarine in his gleaming, glorious power armor. That's like the image of the 40k universe. So today, we got another video we're going to check out here from Arbiter Ian about the evolution of power armor. I know there's different variations, different marks, you know, of power armor, but I don't really know the difference between them, what the various upgrades are, if different legions, chapters prefer using different kinds of power armor, etc, etc, etc. So hopefully Arbiter Ian will answer all of these questions here today in this video. As always, down below, excuse me, in the info section, there will be a link to this original video and to Arbiter Ian's channel, so check those out. Arbiter Ian definitely makes a lot of great Warhammer 40k content, so you should definitely check out his channel. He's got a Patreon. If you want to support him monetarily, check out his Patreon and everything that he offers. He's a great guy and definitely deserves it. So let's check out this here video. This is Evolution of Power Armor, every mark from 1 to 10, Warhammer 40k lore in 20 minutes.
Hi gang, one of the most iconic images of Warhammer 40k is the Space Marine clad in power armor, the highly advanced futuristic plate armor available to warriors of the Imperium and used not only by the Space Marines but also by the Sisters of Battle, the Custodes, the Sisters of Silence, and many more. But what exactly is power armor in 40k? And
that's true. I didn't think about that, is that there's also variations of power armor used by different factions, you know, like you said, the Sisters of Battle, Sisters of Silence, and the Custodes. Although I would assume the Custodes power armor was essentially just like Space Marine armor, but specific for the Custodes, like, you know, just better. But I guess we'll find out.
Silence and many more. But what exactly is power armor in 40k, and how has that silhouette we're so familiar with evolved over the 10,000 years it's been in use?
These are the questions we're here to find out. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't the first version of power armor actually used by the Thunder Legion, the Thunder Warriors or whatever. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it was actually Astartes that had the first like Mark 1 power armor or whatever, but I'm pretty sure it started with the Thunder Warriors, but maybe we'll answer that question here.
So power armor is one of the most effective and advanced forms of armor used by warriors of the Imperium in 40k. Over its millennia-long history, there have been loads of different styles, marks, and variants, created for use by the giant genetically engineered soldiers of the Astartes or Custodes, or for more human-sized warriors like the Sisters of Battle. But all these different marks have a few things in common. At its core, Imperial power armor is plate armor, a suit of armored plates drilled into place around the wearer.
It's interesting that, you know, as we're watching this, it's very similar to that first StarCraft 2 teaser. I forget the character's name, but where we see him getting his, you know, Space Marine power armor attached to him. And he's kind of locked in it until his mission is accomplished. The only difference is, of course, is there's, you know, it looks like priestesses here doing rituals and purifying, sanctifying, whatever you want to call it, the armor as he's getting, you know, adorned with it. So, but it is interesting how similar it looks with it being applied.
Armor. A suit of armored plates drilled into place around the wearer. These plates are usually constructed from layers of ceramite, an extremely tough ceramic material used by the Imperium as both the source of armor and for military construction, and that's particularly good at absorbing energy and heat-based attacks.
Well, and I mean, we use ceramic-based armor still today too, or well, still today, I should say. We use that today. There are certain like ceramic plates that could put in vests or whatever to protect, you know, soldiers and law enforcement and whatnot. So it's not just Kevlar, I don't think. So I would assume that the ceramite they're talking about is some kind of ceramic alloy that is obviously some kind of futuristic, you know, form of ceramic material that is better, more pliable, maybe lighter, more durable, etc., etc.
Of the plates that make it up is formed from layers and layers of ceramite, which may be constructed over something else, like an adamantium or plasteel base, or sometimes made from something completely different, like the auramite armor used by the Adeptus Custodes, but ceramite is the standard, and results in an extremely durable and very heavy suit of armor. It's basically made of stone. Power armor suits can weigh hundreds of kilos. But this weight is offset by the systems that give the armor its name. Each suit is built over a layer of electrically motivated fiber bundles that mimic the wearer's own muscle movements, usually by means of some interface with the wearer's nervous system. Not only do these fiber bundles help move the colossal suit of armor, but they also amplify the wearer's own muscle strength, enabling them to hit with more force.
Which, I mean, you're giving a genetically modified, you know, super soldier that's 8 to 10 feet tall more physical enhancement through the armor, like, yeah.
But they also amplify the wearer's own muscle strength.
Like, think of the Mountain like on steroids and then put him in power armor, and that's still not comparable to what Astartes is. The Mountain from Game of Thrones, obviously.
Bundles help move the colossal suit of armor, but they also amplify the wearer's own muscle strength, enabling them to hit with more force in close combat, become a more stable firing platform for heavier weapons, or even just move faster. The armor then comes with its own generator to power all this, often in the form of a backpack. Even at this basic level, power armor is extremely complex and ridiculously expensive.
And I think the backpacks even have different things that can have different purposes. Like some backpacks are also jetpacks. Some backpacks I think might also have shield generators put in them. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Basic level, power armor is extremely complex and ridiculously expensive, well out of the reach of most Imperial citizens, and so it's usually confined to elite or extremely well-funded military forces, or special operatives like Inquisitors, whose power-armored suits are often custom builds just for them. But as well as...
Now, I guess the question would be, you know, what would happen, let's say, an Astartes died somehow on some random world, through fighting, whatever, and some regular Joe Schmo dude, you know, peels the power armor off of him and takes his body out or whatever, and then tries to apply that power armor to him. Is there some kind of like Judge Dredd safety device where it's able to like biomechanically identify that this isn't the original wearer, and so the power armor doesn't work? Or is that not the case? Could like I said, just a regular dude who happens to come upon power armor off of a dead space marine or some other way, you know, find some kind of armory or whatever, would he be able to put on power armor and just wear it? Because from what I understand, like he's saying, it somehow interfaces with the nervous system. And while I know space marines go through genetic and cyber augmentations, there's the Sisters of Battle, which I don't necessarily, maybe they do. I don't know if they go through it. I don't think they're genetically augmented in any way, but I would assume they probably do have some kind of cyber augments, but I don't know if it's like a situation where they just have the cybernetic augmentations for an injury. You know, if they get an eye shot out, they get a cybernetic implant so they can, you know, see or do things better, etc. But I don't know if it's like a standard thing for them to get, you know, implants to allow them to function with the power armor. I would think that would not be the case, because I feel like they're more about purity, you know, and with their faith, but maybe I'm wrong. So that, I guess that's a question that I have is, on top of, could a regular, just, you know, whoever guy, would it be possible to him to like steal some power armor or off of a dead space marine and wear it, or like how would that work? And then like for the Sisters of Battle, you know, how does the power armor work with them? Do they have to go through a similar process like space marines where they get cybernetic implants that attach to the nervous system so that the power armor works? You know, let me know. But anyway, let's continue.
these sophisticated whose power armored suits are often custom builds just for them. But as well as these sophisticated defensive technologies, power armor also includes lots of auxiliary systems. It's common for suits to be environmentally sealed for operation in inhospitable environments or in the void, to contain sophisticated respirators and filtration systems or their own air supply, as well as protective visors, flash suppressors, or audio dampeners for better operation under battlefield conditions. Suits often also include autosenses, advanced augurs and scanners, heads-up displays, night or infrared vision capabilities, suites of tactical communication equipment, and automatic threat detection
radiation
systems.
protection.
The different power-armored suits used by the agencies of the Imperium might be of very different specifications, including some or none of the above equipment, but the pinnacle of Imperial power armor is probably the various marks developed for the use of the Space Marines.
That's what I would
Space Marine
assume.
Power armor is a colossal construction.
I would assume, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I would assume actually, like the Grey Knights, I would assume they probably have like the best of the best power armor that could be made for what their purpose is. I would assume the Grey Knights like can get a hold of, like I said, the best kind of power armor, the best weapons, etc.
Designed to keep its occupant operating at peak efficiency for as long as possible, and to enhance the prodigious abilities of the Space Marines inside it. As well as much heavier plating than other patterns, Space Marine power armor includes medical sensors and injection systems. It carries on board high-density nutrient stores to sustain the Space Marine within, and even has sophisticated waste filtration and recycling systems.
Yeah.
A Space Marine can operate for months at a time without needing to remove the armor.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that would be important, you know, if you're out there in the middle of the field for days, weeks, months, maybe even years in battle, you know, everyone's got to take a shit sometime, you know what I mean? So you got to do something with that. And you don't want to have to take that power armor off and put it back on. A question that I was also thinking of is like, I asked this in my last video with the Terminator armor as well. Like, I would assume that the Primarchs have their own kind of specialized armor based essentially to benefit their unique skill sets, I guess is what I'm going for, you know? So like, but like, is it power armor? Is it Terminator armor? Is it somewhere in between, something more? You know, let me know. I'm curious. Maybe he'll answer that in this video, but I'm curious, like, because they're Primarchs, I would assume that they also would have some kind of special version of armor that is available just to them, because obviously the Emperor would want them to be protected, etc., etc. So anyway,
I'll leave the implications of that to you. The armor's completely void sealed, and its greaves and boots include mag locks to allow the wearer to fight in zero gravity environments. But the biggest technological advantage Space Marine power armor has is actually within the Marine themselves. The final implant given to new Space Marines as they graduate the scout companies is the black carapace, an organic, fibrous material that sits under the skin of the Marine's torso and meshes with his nervous system. Along with the numerous connection points implanted across his chest, back, and arms, this means that the Marine's connection to his armor is much more sophisticated than other forms of power armor, behaving almost like a second skin and allowing him much more natural movement within it. The science used to create all this is ancient and has its roots in the dark age of technology, when mankind spread out amongst the stars. Various STCs from that period managed to survive the following age of strife, whether in the form of the sophisticated exo-armor used by the Leagues of Votan, or the much simpler devolved powered suits used by Knights of the Order on Caliban. And remnants of those technologies could be found on Terra itself, predating the rise of the Imperium, like in the ironclad regiments of Old Albia. As the Emperor started to unify the planet in the 31st millennium, these technologies were adopted and improved upon by his scientists for use in the Imperial armies, notably by the Legio Custodes, the Emperor's elite bodyguard, and the Legiones Cataegis, the Thunder Warriors that formed the spear tip of his army of unity. And it would be their armor, Thunder armor, that formed the first mark of power armor adapted for use by their replacements.
I mean, that answers my question that I had at the beginning of the video was, you know, Mark 1 armor essentially was from the Thunder Warriors.
The Space Marines of the Legiones Astartes. These suits, retroactively designated Mark I, were simple by comparison to the later marks of Space Marine armor. Thunder armor consisted of an extremely heavily armored ceramite torso section powered by an auxiliary backpack supported by more conventional, often unpowered armor on the legs. The fiber bundles in the top half of the armor gave the wearers using it immense upper body strength.
That's pretty sick looking, honestly, that version of power armor right there.
Apparently useful in the close quarters bloodbaths that were the Unification Wars, but the suits weren't fully enclosed and didn't have many of the life support functions of later armors, stuff that just wasn't as necessary when the fighting was confined to ancient terror.
Well, and I mean, also, you know, it's argued that the Emperor knew that the Thunder Legion was only going to be a temporary tool, so you wouldn't need to necessarily make, you know, their armor super sophisticated as some of the Space Marines were. But again, necessity. They weren't fighting out in space or on other planets with certain other environments that would need to have, you know, their armor would need to protect them from. So
this sort of armor, stuff that just wasn't as necessary when the fighting was confined to ancient terror. This sort of armor would have been used in various idiosyncratic local patterns by the earliest of the Space Marine legions deployed at the end of the Unification Wars, but as the Emperor unified the solar system and made alliances with Mars, Imperial and Martian scientists started work on a replacement, something that better suited what the Astartes were created to do. Mark II armor, known as Crusade armor, was the first true Space Marine power armor, developed by the Mechanicum in the Forges of Mars and issued to the growing Astartes legions as the Great Crusade got underway. Crusade armor was a fully enclosed suit, void sealed and with full life support capabilities and with all of the auto senses and auxiliary medical systems that would become standard over the years to come. It was fully powered, including the legs, and exposed cabling was minimized, moved behind the main breastplate or to the back of the leg armor. The placement
yeah, that would suck. Exposed cabling, you know, you just have some cables hanging out here and something gets caught or cut, and then all of a sudden can't move your arm anymore because the circuitry or whatever was cut off, so it doesn't have, your arm doesn't have power anymore in the middle of a fight. Yeah, that would not be good.
Of power cabling was a major concern for every mark of the armor and would be solved in various different ways over the years. The suit itself was constructed of hooped sections, which gave
I'm just curious because we looked at some of these before. Iron Mechanicum Confluence, Legionnaire Stars Power Armor. This is the Mark II Crusade pattern, general issue for solar expansion. Armored respirator housing, auto response shoulder plating, auto responsive, huh? I wonder what that means. I guess maybe responding to their movements. Bounded ceramite, plasteel plating, magnetic adhesion plates, yeah, reinforced greaves. Armor Flex subsuit, Imperial Seal, umbilical connector. I would assume umbilical connector is probably for like re-upping any kind of oxygen or maybe food or something like that. Who knows? Autosensory apparatus. Mars pattern backpack, a power or life support unit. Interesting.
Various different ways over the years. The suit itself was constructed of hooped sections, which gave much greater maneuverability than the old
I mean, this all looks like it's riveted. Honestly, like, it looks like this armor is kind of like riveted together, or the dude was like there and then they riveted the armor in around him. So that would seem like it would make it a pain in the ass to take this armor off. But I mean, it could just be that this plate is riveted over this plate, which is riveted over this plate, you know, to give it layers to protect, you know, lungs, chest, you know, heart, etc. The more important organs in the chest would have, you know, higher levels of protection, and down here near the abdomen not quite so much. And like this is just like one, like the shoulders might be one section that just be taken off individually. The chest might be a section that can be taken off individually, but it, like, yeah, I don't know. But it almost looks like they are kind of like riveted and sealed in, and then would have to be like unriveted and unsealed to get it off, which would be quite the process, I would assume.
Thunder armor, at the cost of being slightly more difficult to maintain and repair, and being much heavier, the backpack generator was made much more efficient to power all this. This was the standard mark of power armor used by the legions at the start of the Great Crusade, and the distinctive helmet with its mono-slit visor became a symbol for the Astartes across the galaxy.
Very Cylon looking.
Heresy, it was technically outdated by newer marks, but many legions and companies still made use of it. it was still widely considered one of the most efficient patterns of armor available at the time, despite being a bit more difficult to maintain. Mark II was in use for so long that it spawned a load of variants. Most legions had their own variant designs and patterns, but one of the more common variants is what would become known as Mark III, iron armor. Mark III is a development of Mark II armor invented early in the Crusade in an attempt to make a heavier form of protection for full-on frontal assaults. Iron armor added additional plating over the top of the Mark II's hoops and replaced the helmet with a new design with a sloped faceplate to deflect incoming fire. This additional armor was mostly oriented towards the front, and while it made the suit heavier, less efficient, and less maneuverable, it was perfect for the brutal boarding assaults it was designed for. While it was originally considered...
So that was kind of more of assault armor for naval situations, boarding ships, and that kind of stuff. Interesting.
It was perfect for the brutal boarding assaults it was designed for. While it was originally considered too clumsy and uncomfortable for general issue, most legions still used some form of iron armor, often assigned to breacher teams, and some of the more direct legions, like the Death Guard or Imperial Fists, favoured it, enough that the variant was officially designated Mark III, and was seen pretty commonly alongside Mark II as the Great Crusade pushed on.
So Mark III is essentially just Mark II with just some other variations that made the front part of the armor more heavy, you know, gave them more protection in the front, and like you said, I guess the different helmet design.
And as the Crusade pushed on, various fragments of lost technologies and STCs were rediscovered, and the development of power armor continued. Towards the middle of the Crusade, the Mechanicum started work on a replacement, a new version of power armor for general issue to the legions. This new Mark IV armor, named Maximus armor, was the most technologically advanced so far, making use...
So I think, I'm pretty sure I said this in the Terminator armor video, but where I'm at in the Horus Rising book, I believe Mark IV armor is what they're currently using. I believe that's what they said Loken was using in one of the chapters. So this is like the level of technology we're at currently in what I'm reading. So
use of newly discovered systems and materials. The new suit removed the large abutted plates of...
All right, so let's look at this design here. So this doesn't look like it's riveted on like the last one does. This looks like it's more of either one piece or, I don't know. We don't see the back though to see like how it could be sealed around them. You know what I mean? Like the last piece of armor, there were like a bunch of like rivets that look like they were basically like literally bolted into the armor. Mechanicum, Apotheosis, Legionotes, Starter's Powers are Product Ident, Mark IV, Maximus Subtype, Heavy Support, General Issue, later Great Crusade. Centralized fabrication supply, auto-receive shoulder auto-reactive shoulder pauldrons, same as before. Thermal exchange radiator and ducting. Okay. So this is, I guess, to filter out radiation, or no, radiator. So this is for like heat dissipation for the suit. What it sounds like. Reinforced greaves for added stability, incorporating superstructure, molecular bonding studs. Okay. So I guess these are just to reinforce the legs with maybe some more load bearing potential. Manus Morty, honorific signifier, plasteel ceramic composite breastplate, hands targeting ocular array, phaeton pattern backpack, power core life support unit. Heavy support war gear, current or later Greater Crusade era.
Previous marks in favor of form-fitting plates linked with flexible joint sections, marginally less maneuverable than the old Mark II, but much easier to produce and repair. The armor quality was improved, offering greater protection despite the suit itself being lighter. The newly armored power cables were moved back to the outside of the plate, and the suit had a much more efficient...
Interesting that he says that this is lighter, but provides less maneuverability. Maybe it's just maneuverability in how you're able to move your arms and legs, joints, not as far as like actual speed maneuverability. You know what I mean? So interesting.
The newly armored power cables were moved back to the outside of the plate, and the suit had a much more efficient and smaller backpack generator. Mark IV was intended to be the final form of power armor required by the legions, and most legions were at least partially reissued with it, but by the time of the Horus Heresy, the reissue wasn't complete, and some legions even preferred the previous heavier version to this new, more efficient one. But it was still one of the more common armor marks seen across the legions, especially amongst traitor legions, since Horus, as War Master, was able to somewhat control supply lines, and it's still one of the most common of the older marks seen in the 41st millennium, with some chapters still favouring it over the later ones. The Horus Heresy then pushed the development of power armor down a number of different directions. At the outbreak of the war, the legions were equipped with a mix of Mark IV and Mark III armor and some Mark II suits, but as the war ground on and armor was destroyed or worn out, the legions were forced into using stopgap designs or combining parts in unorthodox ways. These ad hoc suits could vary greatly, but a number of solutions became so commonplace that an entirely new mark of armor was accidentally invented, retroactively named Mark V or heresy armor. Mark V is based on the Mark IV template, but its most visible addition is the use of molecular bonding studs, designed to reinforce the layers of ceramite against the Astartes' own armor-piercing weapons, and allow additional layers of ceramite to be added on top. This increased the weight of the suit, requiring the backpack generator to increase its output, which meant that the suits could be uncomfortably hot. The helmet design was also modified, using technologies originally intended for the Terminator armor project, and giving Mark V its distinctive mandibles in the form of this mantilla pattern respirator. By the end of the Heresy, this patched-together sort of armor was one of the most common ones seen. In fact, in some places it had entered into mainline production to keep up demand. But
it would make sense that it would be, because I mean, after the Heresy would end, you know, there was going to be a time of needing to rebuild, regroup, and reorganize, both for the Astartes, the Imperium in general, and for the Mechanicus, you know, because they had the Dark Mechanicus, and a lot of the Forge worlds were messed up and were needed to be brought back in the fold, and just production in general would have to be reset up. So it would be, yeah, piecemeal, you know, slapping stuff together would make sense, and having to reinforce it as much as possible, or, you know, etc., etc.
Most common ones seen. In fact, in some places it had entered into mainline production to keep up demand. But after the Heresy, many Imperial forces dismantled these suits as they were resupplied with new ones, considering them ill-omened as well as inefficient. But Mark V still sees heavy use amongst Chaos Space Marine warbands.
I mean, that would make sense.
Technologies are still employed by the more remote and isolated of Loyalist chapters. As well as the stopgap that was Mark V, the Heresy also had effects on the mainline development of Space Marine armor. Mark IV had been intended to be the perfect armor, but Mechanicum research continued, eventually resulting in a suite of advancements that improved overall efficiency and power routing. This prototype suit was originally intended to be called Mark V and was tested by the Raven Guard Legion during the Scalland campaign, which led to it being known as Corvus armor, named after their Primarch, and then eventually designated as Mark VI. Mark VI armor was the lightest form of mainline Space Marine power armor. It offered no
It definitely looks more like sleek. The design or whatever overall kind of looks more like sleek. I guess almost more aerodynamic, I want to say. Just looks kind of smoother. Less bulky overall, I guess. So I would assume it would be lighter, less cumbersome, more maneuverable, you know, more adaptable, and just overall having more protection. I would assume as they're creating more and more armor, it's essentially just improving on flaws of previous generations, and or filling a need for whatever is currently going on when that armor was created.
Mark VI armor was the lightest form of mainline Space Marine power armor. It offered no significant improvements in protection on Mark IV, but its systems were much more modular, easier to replace, and more compatible with the earlier marks. Components could be swapped out easily with less advanced versions in a pinch, and it made good use of the same molecular bonding studs that were seen on Mark V, this time on the facing shoulder guard.
That's smart, making sure your armor is compatible as possible with previous versions, in case, you know, you're out in the field, you get your armor gets damaged, needs to be replaced, and all you have is old parts. You know, you need to be able to slap something together on the fly. Battlefield repairs, so to speak.
Some of the power cabling was moved back behind the plating, and the armor was quieter than any of the previous versions, which made it particularly suitable for stealth work. The new helmet design with its distinctive conical nose also housed advanced auto sensors.
This very much looks ravenish, like birdish. Almost looks like a beak in the eyes.
These suits first entered general issue near the very end of the Great Crusade, and every Space Marine Legion made use of them to some degree, but as the heresy broke out, it's...
So, or no, this is 9th. What am I talking about? So, this is 9th, okay, no, these aren't additions of power armor, these are the legions. I was going to say, like, I was looking at it and thinking, okay, these legions prefer this kind of power armor, but no, these are just the numbered of legions. All right.
It's modular. Every Space Marine Legion made use of them to some degree, but as the heresy broke out, its modular nature, backwards compatibility, and ease of repair meant that it quickly became the more common form of new power armor issued, and the one most commonly seen on the masses of hastily created inductee pressed into service during the war. As a result, it's a relatively common form of armor even in the 41st millennium. At the same time, Mark VII armor was being developed on Mars. While visually quite different and with a new helmet design that owed a lot to the previous mantilla and sarum pattern
This looks kind of like what I've seen for like most like ultramarine pictures or whatever. This looks like that armor. This Mark VII armor, this looks like the standard picture that you see. So I'm just kind of seeing if there's anything different. Shoulder guards, power jackets, armored umbilical, weapon auto sense. I'm pretty sure we looked through this before, and this is just the same thing.
The new Mark actually shared many of the same components as Mark VI, making them extremely compatible in case of replacement.
Backward compatible.
Mark VII finally moved all that exposed cabling back underneath its armor. The decorated chest plastron, which gave its armor one of its most common names, Aquila or Eagle armor. It's also occasionally called Imperator armor. During the heresy, as Mars fell to the traitors, the Imperial Fists evacuated the stock of prototype Mark VII and its development teams to Earth, where they continued work, which meant that by the end of the heresy, many of the loyalist forces defending the palace had been reissued with this mark, and it became something of a symbol for the loyalist Space Marines, eventually becoming the standard mark of new power armor issued to Space Marine chapters for the next...
So that's interesting that Mark VII was being made during the heresy. I guess that just kind of goes to show how long the heresy went on for, with all these different versions of power armor being made during that time, having to fulfill different needs as things gone on, and specifically needing to be backward compatible with older pieces of equipment. In case something gets damaged, then they would need to, you know, patch something together in the field. Hello, play.
Space Marines, eventually becoming the standard mark of new power armor issued to Space Marine chapters for the next 10,000 years, as much a symbol of the Imperium as the Space Marine within it. As the Imperium tried to hold itself together in the wake of the heresy, research and development continued on the armor, but only in a limited form. Mark VIII pattern armor, dubbed Errant armor, was a variant of Mark VII with improved chest and neck plating, but the new raised collar required a new helmet design that made it less compatible with earlier marks, so it only ever saw limited production. It wasn't until way later, during the Indomitus Crusade of the 41st millennium and the resurrection of the Primarch Robert Guillermin, that Space Marine power armor saw its next major improvement. Mark X power armor was designed in secret by the Mechanicum Archmagos Belisarius Call for use by the new Primaris Marines, named Tacticus.
I was gonna say, I was literally just thinking before he was talking about this, I was like, I wonder if they're gonna bring up the Primaris Space Marines, and if that's what the most recent armor was made for. And there you go. So Mark X is what the Primaris Space Marines are using, the like newest version of Space Marines that Rabute has commissioned to be made. That's I guess supposed to be somewhere between like a Custodes and a Space Marine, essentially.
Magos Belisarius Call for use by the new Primaris Marines. Named Tacticus armor, Mark X is developed from a mixture of technologies taken from many of the older power armor marks, including a faceplate that owes a lot to the advanced Mark IV. It's also designed as a modular system. The different armor segments can be swapped out depending on the battlefield role required. The lighter weight elements of the armor, adapted for silent running, can be used to create the Mark X Phobos patterns used by Reaver and Vanguard Space Marine units, and the addition of heavier plating can turn the armor into the Mark X Gravis pattern, used by Aggressor and Inceptor squads. Primaris pattern space.
So, I mean, it sounds like the Mark X armor is very modular and customizable, depending on the role that the person is trying to fulfill, whether it's being silent, stealthy, recon, or assassination, or if they need to be just heavy shock troops, kind of semi-Terminator-ish armor. So that's pretty cool.
Into the Mark X Gravis pattern, used by Aggressor and Inceptor squads. As Primaris pattern Space Marines become more and more common across the Imperium, Mark X has become the new standard pattern of power armor, but the galaxy is a big place and true standardization is practically impossible.
Right.
There have been loads of lesser known marks or
Yeah, I was going to say, it's almost kind of, I would think with just the sheer scope of how vast the Imperium is, it would be impossible pretty much to like create a standard of anything because of how technology would, even though certain, I guess, progression of technology would be considered heretical, there's progression in technology. Things still improved, better versions of power armor, better versions of bolters, blades, etc., etc.
Is practically impossible. There have been loads of lesser known marks or prototype sub-patterns over the Imperium's history. Imperial pattern armor was an extremely early variant design with a downsized power pack and conical helmet, much like the later Mark VI. Local forge worlds and chapter armories also developed their own preferred components, particular patterns of helmet or styles of decoration unique to the chapter's culture, and unique artificer suits might be created for specific individuals, like the runic armor used by Space Wolves rune priests, or the Aegis armor worn by the Grey Knights chapter, built from a combination of Mark VI, VII, and VIII designs, and covered in hexagrammic wards to protect the wearer against the powers of the warp. Even with the reinforcement of the Space Marine chapters in the 41st millennium, making completely new suits is still an expensive and time-consuming effort for a chapter 4.
For sure.
And so armor's often repaired and reused rather than being replaced. And over the millennia, some of these suits have become revered artifacts of the chapter's past. It's common to see Space Marines clad in a mix of armor marks, and chapters might reserve whole suits of ancient armor for use by honored veterans or elite units. Other chapters make deliberate use of older marks of armor, like the Red Scorpions and Minotaurs, who still retain the ability to produce suits of the advanced Mark IV, or chapters like the Carcharodons, who operate far from any resupply and who value the durability and simplicity of some of the earlier marks. And of course, these older marks of armor are still incredibly common amongst the warbands of the Chaos Space Marines. Heretic armor might be derived from millennia-old suits of Mark III or Mark IV.
There's not really a whole lot of little quick one-stop shops that a lot of the Chaos forces can go to upgrade their armor. But then again, they also get all kinds of boons and power upgrades from their gods, so probably isn't really even necessary.
Heretic armor might be derived from millennia-old suits of Mark III or Mark IV plate, modified by the influence of the warp and replaced over time with newer components scavenged from defeated foes or augmented by supplies from loyalist chapters that have turned renegade since the heresy. And all this might be held together using the same hasty stopgap techniques utilized during the heresy. Like much of the Imperium's technology, power armor is both a relic of a previous time and a symbol for the power of the Imperium as a whole. It's a technology built from constant rediscovery and innovation over a couple of hundred years, and then largely left untouched as the Imperium stagnated over the next few thousand. And even with the reinforcement granted by the Primaris Marines, that's still the case in the 41st millennium. Power armor and its distinctive silhouette is as much propaganda as it is a defensive system.
Right.
A status symbol wielded by the Imperium in memory of a past they can't quite reach. Turning from a mass-manufactured, almost disposable asset of conquest to a rare holy relic, surviving suits carefully husbanded over the millennia, hoarded by the Imperium's wealthiest agencies, and the knowledge of how to create it, like much of the Imperium's technology, carefully guarded lest it be lost again. Thanks for watching.
Okay. And there we go.
And if you'd like to see more 40k lore videos, there should be one just popping up there on the right. And if you'd like to support the channel, well, like, subscribe, and there's a link to the Patreon in the thing below. See ya.
In the thing below, he says. All right, well, there we go. Great video. Another great video, as usual, from Arbitorian, going over the evolution of power armors. Every mark from 1 to 10 Warhammer 40k lore in 20 minutes. Great video. yeah, it's interesting just seeing the evolution of power armor from the Thunder Legion up to where it is now. And essentially it seemed like the idea was at the before the heresy even started that Mark IV power armor was going to be kind of the standard armor that was going to be used by all the chapters of the Space Marines going forward throughout the Crusade. And it wasn't until the heresy happened and essentially power armor from then on seemed to have been developed to fulfill certain specific needs. And as time went by, more and more versions of the power armor became more and more backward compatible with older pieces of power armor, and more modular and customizable with older pieces of power armor, and to fulfill specific roles for whatever was going on. So like one Space Marine could have his power armor geared for stealth, recon, etc., come back, report, and then re-gear up in that same power armor, but you know, change certain pieces for heavy shock troop, line breaking, you know, defense breaking purposes, etc., etc. So very interesting to see the evolution and where it's gone. And of course the most recent version being set up for the Primaris Space Marines, the latest thing created by Rabute Gilliman, from what I understand, to be the next newest version of Space Marines. Like I'd asked though, I'm curious as far as the Primarchs go, like what did they use? Was it a special kind of power armor that was made specifically for them and their skill set? Was it like a version of power armor that's kind of somewhere in between power armor and Terminator armor, or what? Because you know, you would think with obviously their advanced, them being just physically bigger, stronger, more advanced humans from their genetic augmentations, that they would be able to wear and utilize better, stronger, more powerful, more heavy, more durable armor. So I'm curious about that. I'm interested, you know, we've gone over a lot of videos over the Imperium and their weapons and armor, and the Imperium units and stuff like that. I'd be interested to learn some more about some of the other factions, weapons, armor, and gear, and how they've evolved over time. You know, I mean, like the Orcs is all just kind of, they slap it together and it just kind of works. But like, I would be curious to know kind of what the Eldar use for their weapons, what their weapons are and armor are based off of, and how their armor has evolved. I guess the same with the Necrons and the Tau, etc., etc. So I could look up some of those videos and see if I could find anything about that. But if you guys know any content creators out there that have made videos going over any of those topics, you know, feel free to link them down in the comments and let me know, and I would love to take a look at that. But again, another great video by Arbitarian. As always, links to this video without my commentary and to Arbitarian's channel will be down below in the description. You should definitely check them out. At least give this video a like, but I would definitely encourage you to also give him a sub and to check out his Patreon to give this guy some support. If you would like to, you could also do me a favor and click the join button down below and take a look at the YouTube membership benefits. See if any of those have any interest to you, and consider joining and becoming a YouTube member. The more people that sign up and become a YouTube member and are able to support me monetarily, the more I'm able to focus on putting out content for you guys on YouTube and making this my full-time gig, which is obviously the dream. That's the dream. But regardless of that, even if you're not able to or are not interested in doing that, I greatly appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video through to the end. It means a lot. Do consider leaving a like and a sub if you did enjoy this video, and I hope you're having yourselves a wonderful day whenever you're watching this. Have yourselves a good one. I'll see you guys on the next.